And time for another guest on the Win Thomas file, and that is Rhian Jones and her book, Rebecca's Country. Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Win. Nice to be here.
Would it be correct that the Rebecca Riot started in July 1843?
That's when they reached their peak, I would say, but they began in 1839 with a handful of attacks, and that then spread across Wales. So by the time they were reaching their height in 1843, that's when they became best known in the summer.
Now, in school, as part of my Welsh history, I was taught that the Turnpike Trust and the Highways Act of 1835 started the unrest. Would you agree with that?
They certainly became seen as a last straw for the tenant farmers and labourers in that area. But they were also built on a whole host of unaddressed issues like poverty, unemployment, general insecurity, financial insecurity. But when the toll gates were imposed and basically began imposing a new tax on people for use of the roads, they acted as a sort of lightning rod for all this existing discontent.
Right. And did the use of lime going to market accelerate the problems as well?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the need to either use things like lime or just to take your produce, your livestock to market and back was something that became much more difficult when it became more expensive because of these tolls.
So to anybody who doesn't know, why was lime used on a farm?
Lime was used as a fertiliser, which was needed to counteract the leaching of the soil by the Welsh rain, because the weather was about as bad then as it is now. So they had to bring in all kinds of outside elements, and they had to cart the lime back to their farms from the lime kilns on the coast where it was burnt.
Okay. Let's look at a Rebecca rioter. Thomas Rees was a rioter. Why?
Thomas Rees was someone who was known mostly as a prize fighter, as a boxer. So he'd attained a small degree of local fame. But he made more of a living as a casual labourer on local farms. And like many people in his situation, he was subject to poverty, slumps in farm work, and general insecurity. He becomes part of the Rebecca movement when a tollgate is attacked in the summer of 1839 at Ifaelwen. So he joins in with a group of local rioters and actually becomes their leader.
Yes, the incident at Ifaelwen shows the intent of the Rebecca riots, doesn't it? How serious they were in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was something that was... I mean, they were almost very professional about it. They would put up public notices saying, we're going to call a meeting to discuss, they called the propriety of the toll gate, like should it be there or not. And then they'd actually democratically come to a decision that it shouldn't be there. And then they'd act to remove it. So it was really not at all a sort of chaotic or amateur organisation. They knew what they were doing.
Well, just to prove the movement, in 1843, 30 gates had been destroyed already, hadn't they? So
that's when it really begins to spread, like that year.
And the Tulloch incidents as well showed the strength of the Rebecca rioters.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
And the Tulloch incident, does that also show the strength of the Rebecca rioters?
I think definitely. And Tulloch is, again, something that brings the movement into the spotlight of the national media and the national government. And what basically happens is that things, from quite a sort of petty start, which is farmers from Tulloch trying or refusing to pay a toll at their local gate into Carmarthen. They then get fined for that. They refuse to pay the fine. Then Carmarthen's police force and bailiffs and special constables get sent out to basically repossess their furniture and their possessions to the same amount as a fine. And what comes of that is another mass public meeting where they decide to actually march on Carmarthen to present all their complaints about all this. So not only the tolls themselves, but things like the new poor law, the basic civic and judicial, their voices heard. And this becomes a very momentous riot.
So again, for somebody who doesn't know, why Rebecca? What is the point of Rebecca?
that it's taken from the Bible, from the book of Genesis, where there's a verse that says, "And they blessed Rebekah," or "the Lord blessed Rebekah, and said unto her, Let thy seed possess the gates of." So that's something that the protesters sort of took as a divine warrant then. Says that Thomas Rees, one of the first Rebeccas, had borrowed a dress from a woman in his neighbourhood who was particularly statuesque. So she had a big enough dress to fit him, and she was known as Big Becca. So he took his name from her. So that's the other slightly more irreverent theory.
I see what you mean, yeah. So he started in Carmarthenshire, spread to Glamorgan. So did they control those two counties, really, in a way? Did they frighten the forces that they could be attacked at any time?
That's right. I mean, by the time that 1843 had come round, as I say, that was like the height of the movement, and they controlled, I would say, a huge amount of southwest Wales, including parts of Glamorganshire. There was a huge amount of support for the movement. There was a lot of solidarity, so it was difficult to get information on the movement. It was difficult to arrest people because people just wouldn't give information to the authorities.
But were they ever caught in action then? Did the troops ever arrive and they were actually then burning down a gate or destroying a gate?
Yeah, there's a couple of incidents that sort of lead to arrests of Rebeccahites, because they are kind of caught red-handed. And there's an incident in Pontarddulais in September of 1843, which involves Rebeccahites, as you say, sort of caught in the act of destroying a gate, and they're caught by the local police force, the Glamorgan Constabulary, and there's a shootout, basically an exchange of gunfire between the police and the Rebeccahites, and 3 of them are arrested and captured at that point.
So we said they controlled those two counties, later Cardigan and Pembroke, although the troops were deployed, so they weren't doing a very good job of stopping all this, were they?
No, it was very difficult for particularly troops that had been brought in from England or other places outside Wales, weren't familiar with the area, weren't familiar with the territory. They didn't speak the language, for example, so it was difficult for them to make any headway. And as a lot of historians have said, the Rebecca rioters were almost like modern guerrillas then. They sort of would adopt guerrilla tactics of how to control their area, which the troops just couldn't keep up with. So
there's a death at Hendy one night. Tell us about that. What happened there? That's very close to home, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, and this happens almost directly after, just a few days after the Pontarddulais arrests. So there's still a lot of worry, really, and sort of anxiety about what's going to happen. But there's another attack on a toll gate in Hendy, and this one, not that unusually, is staffed by a female tollkeeper. It's quite an elderly woman called Sarah Williams. But what is unusual is that she tries to resist the rioters, because the majority of tollkeepers are content to sort of vacate the house. They're allowed to take their possessions out of the house before the Rebeccahites destroy it. But she decided to stay put. And as far as we can tell, she might have said that she was going to inform on them to the authorities, or they might have panicked, who knows. But what we do know is that she was fatally shot at that point, and this is the only death that we know of that's connected with the Rebecca movement.
So shot them, what sort of ammunition were the Rebecca riders armed with then? Were they just shotguns or some other form of weapons?
Yeah, it would be shotguns of the sort that farmers would occasionally use just for sort of like scaring birds or shooting foxes or something like that. But they would, they'd repurpose a lot of these weapons when they were taking part in attacks, either to sort of, to defend themselves, I guess, if the police turned up, but also just using them in a kind of ceremonial way, like they'd have a celebratory round of gunfire after they'd finished destroying the gate or something like that.
Wowee. Okay. Alexander Cordell wrote a book, The Hosts of Rebecca. Have you ever read that book?
Yeah, I read it quite recently, actually, because it wasn't... I was trying to think of the one, because he also wrote a book about the Merthyr Rising that I had read when I was a lot younger, and that captured my imagination. But I hadn't read Hosts of Rebecca until about a year ago. So I read it as I was researching for the book. And because I was trying to write a non-academic book that people might actually want to read and find interesting. I found him useful for sort of vivid descriptions and how to think about characters and that kind of thing, because it is just a great story as well as history, as far as I'm concerned.
It is a great story. It's a bit like the Wild West, isn't it, in a way, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Of course, Cordell's biggest book was Rape of the Fair Country. That was the one that was his breakthrough novel, wasn't it? Yeah. As I say, happening so close, just 10 miles from Swansea, really, isn't it? We talk about Hendy. That's not so far away from Swansea, is it? So it's very close to home, as they say earlier on, yeah?
Yeah, and it's very... I think sometimes Glamorganshire gets overlooked because people think of the Rebeccahites as being completely a West Wales thing.
Yeah.
But you had, parts, obviously, Carmarthenshire bordering Glamorganshire at the time. You had them coming over the border into Glamorganshire. There was a lot of sort of interaction with other protests that were happening in Swansea as well, like the copper workers going on strike as well in 1843, plus the Chartists who had a branch in Swansea as well. So there's all these things happening, and Swansea provides a very interesting snapshot, I think, of all these different kinds of unrest. Well, we leave the readers to find out how it's all stopped by reading the book, Rebecca, okay? Rhian, sorry, yeah, okay. There we go then. So thanks so much for being my guest today. It's been a delight, and good luck with the book, yeah? Thanks so much indeed. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. Diolch yn fawr.